So today we're learning the Maimer Ahavas Yisrael from the Tzemach Tzedek. We're on page 58, but that is in the all Hebrew copy. In the English copy and the volume you have of Menashe, you have to find the mitzvah of Ahavas Yisrael. I don't know the page, but you have to look up Ahavas Yisrael, and we are towards the end of the Maimer. That's the best I could do. The Tzemach Tzedek here, in a phenomenal way, has turned upside down the simple mitzvah of Ahavas Yisrael and not hating another Jew. And that is the purpose of this sefer that we're learning now, and we hope to continue learning it for quite a while, to go through many mitzvahs as possible. He gives us a deeper appreciation, understanding of the mitzvah. Not that the mitzvah on its own isn't legitimate, and not that the basic commentaries aren't correct. It's all true. But when you have the salt and pepper, in addition to the essential idea, the idea itself, it's a whole different mitzvah. And a person's willingness and excitement to do the mitzvah is with a different flavor and taste versus just doing it robotically, etc. So what is he teaching us here? He's teaching us here that the mitzvah of Ahavas Yisrael is truly the mitzvah that encapsulates all of Torah. And how is that? Because the mitzvah of Ahavas Yisrael is about letting go of ego, surrendering to Hashem, vis-a-vis expressing your love for another Jew as for yourself. And if you're able to do that, then all the mitzvahs that you do are with that same level of humility, of bittul. And that's at the core, Yoini, of a mitzvah. Is the mitzvah being done with self-aggrandizement? Is the mitzvah being done with some level of ego? Is the mitzvah being done with pride and arrogance? Or is the mitzvah being done genuinely for the sake of Hashem and nothing else? Nothing else. Not your mother, not your father, not your rabbi, not your rebbe, not your job, not your degree. All other things might be justified in the particular situation you're in at the time, but it's not genuine. We have to for a moment understand that when I say not genuine, it doesn't mean it's bad, okay? It doesn't mean it's evil, but it's not genuine, okay? Right? If a person goes to university to get a degree, ultimately to become a physician or a social worker or whatever else you do, to make parnasa, fine. That's a fine thing. But you didn't learn the sciences and philosophy or whatever else you took in school because you just meant science and nothing else. You want to understand God and science, and that's it. No. You did it because whether it's pre-classes, pre-qualification classes, prerequisites, or other classes, ultimately leading to a degree, which will get you a job, will make you money, you're able to pay your tuition, feed your family, and give tzedakah. And that's what I mean, that it's not genuine. So maybe we shouldn't use the word genuine. It's not the highest form of doing it lishma, right? We have the words that we're accustomed to in Chazal, lishma and shaloi lishma. Lishma means for the sake of it itself, nothing else. Shaloi lishma means not for that itself, but that is just a means to an end. Or take away the word just, that's a means to an end. So the Tzemach Tzedek says that if you work and to refine yourself, to live with true Ahavas Yisrael, you love the other person because the other person is part of you and part of God. Right? Part of God is greater than part of you because you have self-love. You cover up on yourself. So if you look at the other person, I love him because in other words, I'm adding now something. What Hillel says, don't do to the other what you don't do to yourself, is selfish. That's not the highest form. That's also selfish. In other words, I don't want to be seen and perceived as a bad guy. Therefore, don't do that to someone else. So that's also not the highest form of love. Ahavas Yisrael is the greatest Ahavas Yisrael is because we're all one. Kulanu baruchenu ke'echad. We're one because God is one. Hashem echad. Hashem echad, God being one, is greater than don't do this to the other because you don't want to look bad. You don't want to look bad, so don't make the other person look bad. That's what we learned yesterday. But if we understand more correctly, it's even deeper than that. The Ahavas Yisrael is because we're rooted in Hashem Echad. And that's why the Tzemach Tzedek said this phenomenal thing, Yoini, that the Hareini saying, I hereby accept upon myself the mitzvahs I say of Yahavta l'reacha kamoicha as a prelude to tefillah, to davening. Each morning we should say that 7 days a week. Says, this is from the Arizal, that is the way we can manifest truly Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad. Because if you're able to put aside your issues for another person, it shows you have bittul. And that's what it's all about, the bittul. Let's go. Go now to the last about 10, 15 lines in page 58.
Rabbi,
yes?
Rabbi, an example of that, a basic example would be, let's say someone that gives tzedakah and then wants to have the name on the shul rather than someone gives the tzedakah anonymously without the name.
That's right. And the Rambam says that the greatest way of tzedakah is like to be anonymous. The person who you give to doesn't know who it's coming from, and you don't know who it's going to. No, there are not too many people like that. The Rebbe did say, by the way, and others too, but that if the Rebbe encouraged people who didn't want to have their name and all that, he said, but sometimes putting your name and letting people know is a greater act because you really don't want to, and you're only doing it so someone else will also give. So there is an exception to that. But what you're talking about, Yoini, is correct as far as the basic level of I want to get mileage out of my tzedakah, and trust me, there's a lot of that. People will give to certain places and things where they're recognized and or they'll get more publicity and it's a bigger splash. But listen, the bottom line is with tzedakah, they should just give the tzedakah. But you're right. You know what I'm saying? If you're asking, you're right. Okay, let's go into the text now. I want to finish the mimer today. So we're learning over here. This is, we spoke yesterday about the Shem Yichud Kutchabrichu, Shchinte, right? The combination of the Shechina and the Shem Yichud. And now we're on about the 6th, 7th line from the top of 58. V'zeh nasa. V'zeh nasa yidei kiyem mitzvahs v'yafta l'reacha kamecha. Now, and this is done. How do you accomplish this yichud? Through the mitzvah of Ahavas Yisrael. K'shok v'shar kol ha-mitzvahs heim k'moi pirush. And all other mitzvahs are only but an interpretation lahasbir ha-yichud, to explain the yichud. This is the answer of the Tzemach Tzedek to the question that he didn't ask explicitly, but I told you that was the issue that he was asking before he started chapter 2, and that is, why does it say V'idach Perushahu, the rest of Torah is a commentary on Ahavas Yisrael? If you would say that Ahavas Yisrael is an introduction to the 613, that's understood. But when you say that there's only one mitzvah and all these 612 are just but a commentary, that needs clarification. So the Tzemach Tzedek answered that question in this paragraph, and that's what he's alluding to, where he says, pirush lahasbir hayichud. You see? Because the mitzvah of Ahavas Yisrael is about one and one thing only, yichud Hashem, unity with God, i.e., bittul to Hashem. Tahainu be'ezo ifin yia yichud. The mitzvahs, all the mitzvahs are teaching us and telling us In what manner should the yichud, should the unity take place? In chochmosai, if you're talking about the wisdom of God, the chochmosai, with God's wisdom, the Talmud, in the Talmud, Torah and Torah. The Ava, if you're talking about the mitzvah of loving Hashem, the Ava through the mitzvah of love. The Shari Midas and all other attributes, emotions, the Shari mitzvahs are done and accomplished through the rest of the 612 mitzvahs, each one to its own. A person who attaches himself and binds himself to another person, to a friend, the reason for his connection, it is the true love, and the unity. Sometimes he does it through speech. He speaks with his friend intelligent things. And at other times, he reveals to his friend an emotional feeling by revealing the love that he has to his friend. And yet at other times, how does he interact and show his love for his friend? Through action. By doing a simple favor for another yid. So too, there are 248 positive commandments. They correspond to the 248 limbs of the king. And with this particular mitzvah of the 612, the primary unity accomplished is through this particular limb. The Shara Pchinas Klulim Ba, and all other limbs are included in it as a subordinate. The Chein al Derech Zeh B'Shar Kol HaMitzvahs. So this is the Tzemach Tzedek's explanation, is it? Good to see you in Talis and Tefillin. Obviously, there's no minion around you, so Hashem should help that you should daven with the 10 koiches HaNefesh.
I'm after minion.
Oh, you're after minion. Okay.
Yeah,
Okay. So the Tzemach Tzedek teaches us that each mitzvah yoni is a particular strand in manifesting the yichud. So when you put on tefillin in the morning, you have to know about tefillin to understand how tefillin is an explanation of Pirush of Ahavas Yisrael, because tefillin somehow brings down the yichud of Hashem through the tefillin. And so the mezuzah, and so every other mitzvah. Let's continue. The Tzemach Tzedek uses another example. Let's look at this. Mitzvahs atifas talis. Putting on a talis. Bashgacha pratis. Israel is wearing a talis. The mitzvah of putting on a talis is brought down. Soim tosim alecha melech. It's connected with place. Shall you place upon yourself a king? That's in the Torah. Pchinas oir makiv. A talis, just like a king, is the encompassing light, right? A king, Isser, it's not your father, not your mother, not your brother. He's the king. He's overbearing, right? But that's makif. It's the encompassing energy. It's the periphery energy. It's the It's that feeling that it's not internalized, but yet it leaves the impression on you that Hashem is the Melech, Hashem is the king. I don't understand the details of the king. I don't see him in every aspect of my life. I don't visit him daily. But I know there is a Melech. I know there is a king. That's Or Makif. The talis, which surrounds the person, right? It's on your body. It's called Atifas talis. Is analogous to that because it encompasses you, it surrounds you. It's natifa, it wraps you up. You're wrapped up in the talis. So he says, Ki'im ein yira ein chokhmah. If you don't have, Chazal say in Ovis, yira, fear, or ein chokhmah, then your wisdom is no true wisdom. Yira she'acher chokhmah, and then there is a yira that comes pre-chokhmah, and then there's a yira that comes following chokhmah. Because of imein chokhmah, we have another verse. If there's no wisdom, ein yira. So how do you reconcile the two? Hainu bittul b'mitzias This is total nullification of existence, because of the love, the kiruv. Ki midas hayira hi kol hakorav yosef. Yosef tipol olav habitul. Yira, or fear, causes you to be frightened. Meaning, it's awesome, I can't get close. So in other words, the yesh of self is more obliterated and annulled when you have the sense of yira. Mashenkin ava, conversely, ava mirochet tiskabe yosef. From distance, it's strengthened. Abstinence makes the heart grow fonder. It's that same idea. This is very interesting, you should know, because in many places in Chassidus, it's just the opposite. Yira is associated with Richuk, and Ava is associated with Kiruv. Tzemach Tzedek is employing it here differently. And he's saying that Ava, when is the tshuka? When is the passion greater? When there is the abstinence. When there is the Richuk, the distance. So you want it more. Right? Whereas Yira is the Kiruv, because you get close, you realize, hey, oh boy. It reminds me of a story. The holy Ribnitzer Rebbe, Mordechai ben David, I think, says this on a clip. He was very close to the Ribnitzer. He was like a little shtickle gabe of his. He says he once brought him to the Kaisel, and he wanted to go to Kaisel, and guess what? He says to Mordechai, I can't go. So he says, Rebbe, you came here to go to the Kaisel. He says, and he starts shaking like a lulav from the fear. You understand? Because he's getting closer to the Kaisel, he feels the Shechina. And as he feels the Shechina, which is the Yira, because he's close, he says, I can't go any further. So that's what the Tzemach Tzedek is addressing here. Let's continue. After you experience the oneness through the rational, through the intellectualism, through the wisdom of Echad, Hashem Echad, Tieh Hayire Bittul B'Metzias, then the awe coming forth from that experience will be not only an obliteration of Yesh, which means Menashe, Hillel, which means there is a Yesh, there is an existence, and existence realizes the higher power. That's not what we call in Chassidus Bittul B'Metzias. That's called Bittul Hayesh. Bittul B'Metzias means that the whole notion of existence doesn't exist. Bittul B'Metzius. The bittul, the annulment of the concept of existence. Bittul Hayesh means there is a someone, there is a something, and that something is subordinate to Hashem. For example, right? When you have all these ministers fighting for more money for their department, they come to the king, and in front of the king, they're all, right? But nevertheless, each one still exists, because each one is demanding funds and more funding for his department. That means he exists. All he's doing is he's closing his mouth and having respect in front of the king. That's also bittul, but it's called only bittul hayesh. Bittul b'metzias means you don't exist. And by the way, it doesn't mean you don't exist. You don't have a mind and a heart and feet. You're standing in front of the king, but you're not there. Or the other example I gave you in the past, Reb Mendel Futterfass was in our house in California, Marin County, and I have this beautiful painting of the Baal Shem Tov, of Chassidim, 10 of Chassidim in a chariot, in a wagon with a horse flying upwards. The painting is called From Chaslavich to Lubavitch. Reb Mendel noticed it on my wall, and he looked, and he got up. He was sitting at the table. He got up and he started to stare at it, and he turns to me. He says, "The Baal Shem Tov?" I said, "What? Baal Shem Tov? This is never." He says, "The Baal Shem Tov used to travel with 9 other people to have a minyan," and he was totally glued. In other words, as you get into the picture, you're no longer there. But it's not as though you're no longer there, that you're physically not there. the concept of your existence is no longer there. Let's go on. V'nekudis harishimu mimeno yislabish b'hamakif shel talus. The essence, the nekuda of the remnant coming forth from this bittul invests itself in the makif of the talus, in the encompassing aspect of the talus, which is the external fear prior to chokhmah. In other words, before you invest in chokhmah, or better said, before you can experience chokhmah for Hashem, you have to have basic bittul, right? You don't rise to say Shmon Esrei unless you have heaviness of the head. What does that mean? Yira. You're standing before God, dressed like a mensch, and cut it out and behave. You're before the king. Who goes to a king? Who goes to a president dressed like a, schmutzig, dirty, right? So that's the basic level. That's the makif. It's important because you cannot get to chokhmah and echad unless you have that. Let's continue. The kol zerak pirush la yichud shu b'chokhmah shebenefesh k'meshay nafshay be'echad. All this is only but an explanation to the yichud, to the unity within the wisdom of the soul when you have mesiras nefesh be'echad. This is the esoteric secret of this yichud, of this unity. It primarily takes place through the positive commandment of Yahavta, of loving Hashem. Then, quoting Shir HaShirim, you all are beautiful. Yossi, friend, wife, etc. And then you are at the level of being whole before Hashem. As we explained earlier. Last 3 lines of the Mimer. Says the Tzemach Tzedek. We can also explain very well the reason for this mitzvah to love another like yourself. More specifically, to fulfill the negative commandment. Do not hate your friend. That's the negative. There's the positive and the negative. The mitzvah same is loisesem. Based on what's written elsewhere, the pasuk on the verse in Dvarim. In Bamidbar. Hecholzu, pioneer. At Meidchem. We learned the mimer. So remember, we learned that mimer. Loses nikmas Hashem b'midyon. Get up and fight. Take revenge for me, Hashem, with Midyan. Sheklipas Midyan husinas chinam. What is the klipa on Midyan? Strife and division. That is sinas chinam. So if you want to know practically, this doesn't come from stargazers. This comes from the Torah and the Tzemach Tzedek and Kabbalah. That the klipa of Midyan represents division and strife. Midyan. Says Hashem, Nikoim, Nikmas, Midyan, in order to win war, in order to be successful, you have to remove sinas chinam, baseless hatred from your being. It's so appropriate that we learn this because next Thursday is Shivas B'Tammuz, the first of the 3 weeks, which was all about sinas chinam. But Tzarech Liyas, the last words of the Maimer, Nikmas Hashem b'Midyan. We need to take revenge. We need to take God's revenge, be Midyan, on this nation, Midyan, which represents strife and division. Yu'un Shun. Look over there for more details. What is the Tzemach Tzedek adding over here? Tzemach Tzedek is saying that, in other words, until now, he's explained the mitzvah of Ahavas Yisrael associated with yichud. Now he's saying there's something kind of very practical that you could walk away with. And it's so beautiful that he ends the mind in this way. The concept of sinas chinam, right, is is the reason why loy sisna, you shouldn't hate your friend. Because if you do that, you are a midyon. You're klippas midyon. You're full of strife and division. Always making division and strife between people. So the main thing is to not do that. Not that loy sisna, don't hate. On the contrary, doing that is accomplishing the elimination of midyon. And that's a very practical bottom line thought that we could take. Tomorrow we're going to have a Mitzvah a Hasidic Farbrengen, because Shabbos is the special day called Yud Beis Tammuz, which is the Yom HaGeula, the redemption day when the previous Rebbe was freed from prison and his life was spared. So Chabad doesn't say Tachnun on Shabbos, which we don't say anyway, and on Sunday, on Yud Gimel. So tomorrow...
What about tomorrow?
Tomorrow, what's tomorrow? Tomorrow's Yud.
Well, we're Fabrengen.
Oh, we're going to Fabrengen because we won't be together on Shabbos. Oh, we shouldn't say Tachnun because we're Fabrengen. You got the wrong guy. You got the wrong guy. I'm not into making up days not to say Tachnun, okay?
Making up days.
I live in Borough Park, and every Tom, Dick, and Harry here is not saying Tachnun, but, that's not me. I follow my tradition.
Friday.
What? Monday we're going to say Tachnun. Only Sunday we don't say. Sunday. Boy, Monday is Yudalit, Thomas. We say Tachnun. Chevra, have a great day. We'll see everyone tomorrow. Take care. Bye-bye. Shalom.